Good morning and welcome to the Capitalgang. I am Oscar Semoya Msoke, and as Moses Kale would say, with a bevy of topics for discussion this morning. In the studio, I already have, I don't know what to call you, young, old Duncan Abigaba, who wants to be vice chairman, Western region of the NRM party. So what's the latest update? Have you picked up nominations? You're on the microphone.
Good morning, Oscar, and to our
Just
listeners.
go straight to the microphone in front of you, yes.
The NRM is closing its nominations this morning with a prospective party chairman and a presidential candidate, because I don't think any other aspirant was given nomination forms for those two positions.
Oh, someone came to pick up the forms.
Yes, and they were advised to come back
Friday.
And Friday is you would be returning the forms, not picking them. because the deadline for picking the forms was Tuesday. So if you did not pick the forms by close of business Tuesday, then you have no forms to return on Friday. Yeah, so that's the NRM usually internal democracy. I think there is consensus that the chairman should stay in his position and become a presidential flag bearer once again. So regarding my...
But the other gentleman had not wanted to be president. He wanted to be chairman of the NRM party.
There were two, yes. Yeah, but I think they were advised otherwise, that we will follow internal party democracy and maintain the current leadership at the very top.
Pardon?
I mean, Duncan is talking about internal party democracy, but let's unpack what that means. Does it mean that a decision was formally tabled that this candidate will be a sole candidate? Is that an internal process?
Yes, there was a discussion at the Central Executive Committee level that endorsed the party leader to continue with into the next term.
But
yes, we assume that the Central Executive Committee spoke for all of us in that.
Are they an electoral college?
Essentially, the president will be subjecting himself to the National Delegates Conference, which is going to sit in the month of August. It is illegally the National Delegates Conference has powers to elect somebody to become party chairman and then the presidential flag bearer. Yeah. So, but before the delegates conference sits, the Central Executive Committee is at the apex of the party, and we believe, to an extent, not legally, but logically, it can represent the Central Executive Committee.
Okay, then let's take the word democracy out of it. Let's call it something else.
So, Duncan, I have to tell you that is Ofono Pondo's chair. It causes people to stammer. So, young people, I thought you were not going to stammer, but now let me go to a topic at least where you will not stammer. Give us an update about your own nominations and return.
So, in the same spirit, I remember I had expressed interest in running for the position of National Vice Chairperson of NRM for Western Region. In the NRM Constitution, you're Vice Chair for a region, but you're elected by the whole country, by delegates from the whole country. It was in the spirit of building, nationalism and so forth. So you don't become a tribal leader. So I had expressed interest as a young Turk. I had my ideas, I had my campaign that I had called the Creative Disruption to reform, rebrand, renew, and reshape the NRM. I think the NRM has become a bit obsolete as a revolutionary party, 40 years into power. So I thought would young people come in and create some internal change. However, I wish to say that some elders reached out and told me a few things. One was that if you're going to reform this party, then you should have run for party chairman. Because as long as the party chairman is still the chairman, he wants his party to operate the way it is operating. So I was defeated at that. To me, that we should have consultations amongst my competitors, and then we had conversations with some of the like-minded competitors, and I stepped down in favor of one of my competitors. I am not going to mention them on air, but in the due course of the week, my team and I are drafting a statement that we are going to put out in support of one of the candidates in the race.
And it may not be Dr. Chris Bariomonsi.
It could be, it could not. But if you look at the candidates who are in the race, you have this new radical group. I'm sorry, but I might call it's close to militia. The PLU, it has two candidates there.
In NRM?
It has two candidates there. And I do not agree with their ideas. I find them extremist. I find them intolerant. And I don't think right now, unless they have their internal reforms as that unit, they do not represent some of us. So I find some of my views actually they agree mostly with what Honorable Dr. Chris Bariomonsi represents.
Right.
Well,
time will tell. So most welcome to Gang, Joseph Otieno, the UPC Lone Ranger. Most welcome to Gang. Young veteran journalist, Angelo Izama, most welcome to Gang.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Benjamin Katana, Mr. Moneyman of NUP.
Thank
most
you very
welcome
much.
to Gang.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, and I have a guest in the studio, Mr. Tumusime Kato, or I should say Kato Tumusime. He's an advocate. You're most welcome to the Capitalgang.
Thank you, Oscar, for hosting me this morning, and I'm happy to be part of the gang today.
Yes. First time on the gang.
True. It's my first time.
Yes, and an advocate, you and your brother, twin brother, both.
Yes.
Yes. Do you work in the same law firm?
Yeah. We work together in Chiza and Mugisha Advocates.
Right.
Yes. And we are both passionate about human rights and freedoms in this country.
Okay. I intend to invite your brother as well at some point.
Oh, that would be very
But Oscar,
yes.
I thought once upon a time you used to give me a fantastic title that I am the most optimistic member of UPC. Now today you called me Lone Ranger. But most importantly, you also gave me the title.
Jimmy Akena was here. You said you're a media mogul and Lone Ranger.
Jim, he called me Lone Ranger or president of the media?
President of the media.
Why didn't he use a whisper? But anyway, look, you also called me the most optimistic Ugandan.
These days I don't say most optimistic Uganda, I say most optimistic UPC member.
Since you brought me on that, and particularly because this crowd is predominantly young, I thought that I would reclaim those both titles for the purposes, including for your special guest today.
Okay, most optimistic UPC member, correct. About Uganda, maybe not. So, Kato, I invited you on the issue of Balaalo. We had a discussion last week, and I did not actually feel it was I did not know it was strongly felt across the country. And that's why I invited you, because I'm told that you have good knowledge and a balanced knowledge of Balaalo in northern Uganda.
Yes.
So if we could start with an update, have they left now, northern Uganda?
Thank you, Oscar. The last update is that some people have started leaving voluntarily the northern Uganda, but some are still hesitant and they have questions that must be answered at that level before they leave and they are forcefully evicted. But the issue of the Balaalo is, I think, being misused by the politicians, especially in this time when politics are the helm and the peak. And that's what should be the issue, so that these people don't tend to affront politics ahead of the issues that must be underlined and must be identified and then resolved, so that we have a balanced debate and the issue resolved at that level. The Balaalo, most people tend to quantify them to mean the people that are Bahima or the herdsmen from the west, which is not true. I think name Balaalo has a big origin. These are people who would move from one place, settle in a place where there are pastures and water, and then because they couldn't have permanent places fixed there, so they would sleep over the Kulala. That's, I think, where it all gets the meaning of Balaalo. So that when the pastures would be used over in that particular place, they would freely migrate to a new place. So even the Baganda, even the northern people, even different tribes can have the Balaalo within themselves, as long as they are herdsmen, as long as they move from one place to another to look for pastures and water. But the issue now is, when most of these politicians are talking about the Balaalo, it seems to be one ethnic group and one tribe, which is the Banyankole in specific, and Bahima, which is not true. But how?
I have to tell you, two things I pick from what you're saying. The balanced debate. I don't know if we'll get to that point of the balanced debate on this one. And the context, the background you've given us. Benjamin Katana also gave it to us last week. And as he was pointing to himself, saying he could be qualified as a Mularo, whereas maybe Duncan
erroneously qualifies. But I should say, I personally am a herdsman, but I am not a Mularo, because I have not moved from one place to another searching for pastures. But the context of the Balaalo and how it is being brought and flagged down to the public, now I qualify to be called a Mularo, whereas not. But the issue... Are
you a herdsman in northern Uganda?
Not in northern Uganda.
Okay.
But most people will not now take me out and draw a distinction on whether I am a Mularo or not. As long as you are a herdsman, then the general perspective and understanding will now refer to you as a Mularo, whereas not. But now, the issues now that are surrounding the evictions of the Balaalo and leaving the northern Uganda should be, I think, identified and characterized. Before even the UPDF, like the CDF, talked about his personal involvement in the evictions takes place, I think we need to identify and categorize these groups of the Balaalo that are in northern Uganda. One, how did they acquire this land? The laws in Uganda allows everybody to own property everywhere in this country, and that one is a fact. Two, it provides for ways on how do you acquire that land. For example, we have different tenures in Uganda that govern land. The issue of the politician saying that the Acholi land is customarily owned does not suffice, and therefore does not bar any person from owning that piece of land legally. As long as they follow all the dynamics, as long as they follow all the procedures, they can own that land legally in this country. Acholi land is not the only land that is customarily owned. Even other cultures and have customarily owned land, and people have gone there, followed the legal procedures, and owned that land. And therefore, that one also doesn't make sense to me, that because it's customary land, then therefore it must be left and owned by the Acholi people. There are people who moved to northern Uganda, followed the procedures legally provided, purchased land, and they are landlords, they are owners. Some have lease, some are renting that land, and some have owned that land legally. They paid, they attached the monetary consideration, and therefore they own that piece of land. We know that in this country we have people that use their power, that use their connections to also come and grab land. We have those people in northern Uganda, and now that's why the question, the biggest issue should be around investigate. How did, for example, Benjamin acquire that land in northern Uganda? You don't own it, but allow me use you as an example. Or let me use Mr. Ochieno. If he owns that piece of land, how did he acquire that land? Yeah. Did he attach a monetary consideration to that? Did he follow the procedures? Does he own that land legally? Is it acceptable in the laws of this country? If the answer is yes, why would you evict them? Okay. If for example, Angelo goes to my area in the western and purchases land legally, whether land is customary owned or it is private land, does it stop him? Is there any law that bars him from owning that land? Now that's where the issue is. But if you do investigations and find that a different individual went to northern Uganda, used his power, used the machinery and the UPDF to grab that land, now that one should be evicted even with immediate effect. There is no question about that. But the issue surrounding the evictions now is generalization. You generalize even people who paid their money, followed the laws, acquired that land legally, but you want also bundle them together with the people that grabbed that land. Now that's where the issue is. The executive orders as given by the president are very good, but the problem is the enforcement of the eviction orders. Now, the issue should be around investigating how each individual acquired that piece of land, and then if you don't qualify and meet the legalities for one to acquire land, then you must evict. But the people who acquired that land legally, then they must be either compensated or they should be called into negotiation so that they see how to leave that land. If the interest of the Acholi people is to keep their land, but not to bundle them with the people that illegally acquired that land through different unlawful means.
A good submission.
Thank
so
you.
That last bit, that if Acholi people do not want Balaalo in their land, they should have a sit down and discuss all of that.
Yes.
Are there any comparisons with when you had the same issue in Bunyoro area? Of ring fencing?
There are comparisons, but now you see at the end of it, all the Bunyoro people had to bow down and say we cannot take this on. And as we speak, we have so many people that are not Bunyoro but are occupying Bunyoro land. So it's a matter of discussion. If I have all the rights and interest in the land, then you must follow the procedures to acquire the same willingly, and it shouldn't be by force that you have to force me to surrender my interest in the land because it's customary owned, because you have customary attachments to it and all that. Now that one doesn't suffice in this kind of discussion. If you are interested in the piece of land I own in northern Uganda, then come talk to me. If I am an interested seller and you are an interested buyer, you buy the land. And we have to agree on the consideration that must be involved in that transaction.
But if the government wants to build a bridge over Capital Radio here, that is very possible. They'd come and say, we want to build a bridge. This is national purposes, and they'd compensate you. That can happen as well.
It can happen as well, but there must be compensation itself. So we cannot deal away with the issue of that precedes eviction. Compensation must be done. And like most of the people are saying, if the government thinks that they want to protect the Acholi people with their land, let them call the legally respected and accepted owners, sit on a table, agree on what amount they should be compensated, and they will vacate freely. But we don't have to pull legs and force so that we can bundle the old people that are occupying northern Uganda out of their land.
So seeing that is not what is happening, that the evictions are going to be forceful, what next?
But the challenge is that, yes, the government, this regime that we know, it will use its force. Like I said, we are in an electioneering period, and they are looking at how to satisfy the people of the northern Uganda so that they can win their votes. They will do anything possible so that they can be on their side. But the effect now will go on you and me, who are the taxpayers, that these people will be evicted forcefully when they have their legally acceptable interest in the land. Now they will sue the government. The taxpayer, me and you, will face the burden of now compensating these people for the actions of the regime that is not looking at the bigger picture of how much effect do we have and the loss that we shall suffer as a country, but they are looking on how they can win the souls and the hearts of the people in northern Uganda during this election period.
But, and a final one to you, if senior lawyers in this country, and I'm told the senior lawyers that support the Balaalo to leave include the minister, Mao, and the big man himself, who are from the land, and these are senior lawyers. So then what would you say to that?
You see, being a senior lawyer and trying to underline issues as they arise, yes, it doesn't take away the fact that you are prone to mistakes as a human. Some of these people might be facing the influence of the local people they represent because they are respected people in their area, and therefore that one doesn't take away that they are also making mistakes in this. I wonder if a person that would be guiding these kind of evictions, like the Chief Justice, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, would be guiding the rest of the public that, look, you are interested in retaining your land, but we have legally acceptable ways on how this must be followed. I am wondering why they are also joining them to also call the forceful evictions when they know the impact on the taxpayer and the regime itself. Yes, but we leave it to them. I know as the discussions go on, maybe they will come back on board, come back to their understanding of what is legally acceptable, and therefore they must also come back on track and do what is necessary regarding on whether they support it or not. It will be another issue.
Okay. Angelo, last week you did not have enough time to present on this topic because you had to leave early, but at the time
capitalism called.
Yes,
I had to go do some work.
You had an opportunity. You had even personalized this and saying on why Balaalo should move.
Yes and no. I said that northern communities are not in the habit of victimizing. In other words, if someone is, as my brother here said, considered faultless in their actions, it would be very, very strange for them to be victimized just on the basis of their ethnicity. And I referred back to the harmony in the cattle corridor that linked the west of the country to the north. And there's a piece of history that I shared last week, which is that if you look at the district administration system preceding independence, all the districts made money, and the colonial government planned for certain activities to be encouraged in, for example, here in Uganda, those trade and those coffee. But Bugisu, for example, you just go and look at the history there. A good reference point is Samuel Luingo's book, Uganda, an Indian Colony. You'll see that the Bugisu district administration and the Bugisu cooperative had done such a good job raising revenues from coffee, but that coffee was actually indigenously owned, indigenously managed, until of course the British came in and messed it up. So the Acholi district administration's revenues were largely from cattle, because cattle was the main business of that district. And I gave an example that at some point the colonial governor here and the guy who was in charge of the treasury had sought to prevent the Acholi district administration from taking extra government grants, because the cattle business was so lucrative, that the Acholi district people then came up with creative arguments like, we are putting our money in bursaries for students, and we are spending on this and that social service just to get government money. But they were making their money essentially from cattle. Now, fast forward today, the feeling is that after the loss of power, which was centered administratively in the hands of Northerners in the 60s and 70s, and of course, in the 80s under Joseph's party, and then a war that ensured, a vicious one. You had nearly continuous strife for 30 years in the north. And today, the issues of land are no longer economic. If I was to argue the law, and the legal arguments that have been made here, I would be really doing this issue a disservice. I think I would rather argue the politics, because when I speak to northern leaders, and I took some time actually to speak to some of them in the course of the week, their issues are more political than legal. And there's a good basis for this. By the way, if you're listening to us around the country, remember that we are talking about the general election next year, but in fact, there are some issues that have been adjudicated outside an election, and one of them is land. You recall, I think the only election I consider that President Yoweri Museveni lost fair and square had to do with him putting his personal reputation and his political record on essentially what was the national referendum, and going around the country encouraging Ugandans to support a land acquisition bill that his party was trying to put through Parliament. You remember that? Where did that end? I think the compulsory acquisition of land, even if there were good legal arguments for it, even if there was like an administrative basis to say that, and he made good arguments about, and these are not new, acquisition of land, I think, was first proposed for development was first proposed in 1965. But despite that, the general fear in the country was that compulsory acquisition of land was a thinly disguised political move to dispossess land from certain communities. This is the sentiment in the North, let us just be honest. Okay? Now, land also has a sentimental value. And one of the arguments that you should put aside is that sometimes certain items have legal pecuniary value, and then they have a greater sentimental value. On the way here, the guy I came with, I forget his name now, who brought me here, he's a cab driver. I gave him the example. I said, if I had $10 million and I went to Blange and I told the government of Uganda that I would like to acquire the Kasubi tombs, and the commercial proposal is great, okay? And I said, well, I can even lease it, but I can own it for a period of, 50 years. Here's good money. Would the Baganda agree? Of course they do. Yes. A lot of taxi drivers are graduates. And this one here, I think he could have a master's in business administration from the way he was talking. He actually listens to you. Now, yeah.
Cab driver.
Yeah.
Taxi driver in Uganda might mean matatu. But cab driver, they are quite educated these days.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of
just finish
but
that
I'm digressing. Yeah. So, the issues of land are political. And I think the instincts of the president are right. In this case, he has an election that is coming up. But remember, he had been bruised politically with that attempted referendum on compulsory acquisition. And land matters across the continent, Oscar, are very, very, very touchy issues. Now, let me just run down what I think is at stake here. If you think about it as purely as a political matter in the north, first, in northern Uganda, it's not true that there haven't been reparations or attempts to deal with the effect of the war. General Saleh, himself a cattle keeper, though I understand in this period he has moved his herds back to his father's farm. That's what I was told this week. He's been I have no idea. It must be Benjamin, no, let me focus. Yeah. Okay. But he has, over the last 20-something years, dealt with various rebel groups, made settlements with them, many of them in the North and West Nile. Even until recently, the president was there and he offered 29 billion in West Nile. So I think he's going to take that territory anyway. But these were never really articulated politically. They were kept quiet. There has not been a big admission that the North has suffered disproportionately and that we are going to restore. And that's one of the arguments of Northerners, and particularly the Acholi elite, is like, you promise restoration of our cattle herds. Where is it? You're just making like small piecemeal arrangements, here and there. So there are sectional settlements that have taken place. Secondly, reconstruction of northern Uganda. If you've been to the north recently, I mean, there are cities like Lira that are just like major agricultural hubs. So from West Nile, for example, I can't complain. I'll tell you honestly, we have a great road from Matiak all the way to Adjumani. There's a bridge that's going to cross that Laropi ferry where it is in the Nile. We are feeling very optimistic about things for the first time in maybe 15 years.
And you have electricity.
Electricity is on the way, but there are issues there. So, but reconstruction has never been articulated politically. It has only been done, with technical language, Northern Uganda Reconstruction Program and things like that. And so, as a political project, it has not been said that there is reconciliation between the Southerners now in power, the Benjamins of this world, and these guys who are formerly leaders. And there's a general feeling there, and let me just end, that these corporate Balaalo who are invading the north are exercising undue influence because they have the money, because they may have political backing, and that their intentions are really to continue a process of dispossession of northerners, and land is the last red line in that process. That is really the sentiment. And I said last week that I feel northern leaders should just be more honest. It serves the country well to say, look, it's not that we don't want development. I mean, after all, they themselves buy land from each other. Okay? It is just that we feel that our place within the polity of Uganda is a weak position. And there are political solutions to this. And until we get to that point where we just acknowledge that what we're really dealing with is national reconciliation, the Balaalo issue is just going to be a process of victimizing. As my brother said, he has some bona fide owners of land in the north. Thank you.
I'll give you an extra minute because of a key word you've used, invasion. Yes. That's like a deliberate local colonialism.
Yes, but you see, if you look at it in terms of war language, the first word that comes to mind is pacification.
Right.
Remember, pacification has a Roman Latin root. The Roman legions used to pacify tribes. The Latin word is pacara, which means scorched earth, by the way. Kill everything, poison the wells, burn the villages.
Pacification of the north.
Remember, there was a whole ministry called, and inappropriately named in my view, the Ministry for the Pacification of the North. Well, if you do a scorched earth policy in the north, how do you restore it? Invasion is just a weak form of that process. Okay, you can invade and you can withdraw. But when you have gone there and you have pacified, and that's why I was talking about the dispossession of the north.
Right.
What is the political response after you have achieved that victory?
Let's start with you, Duncan Abigava. They have been picking up keywords. Katotu Musime said balanced debate, and I told him I do not see it coming. And now we have pacification, invasion by bullies from the West. Interestingly, this studio always has a few people from the West who would qualify for Balaalo. I don't know whether. So, but and when Angelo said I will not talk about the legal side of things, that's when Abdu smiled. But he had been looking at you very sternly. But Duncan, if you have a Chief Justice and a Minister of Justice also promoting the President's view, then it is political, not legal.
Landowners in the north. Both those brothers of mine are large landowners. You should ask how they acquired their land.
Right. Do you know?
I know, no, but of course he told me he's bought a farm and he's been trying to replant it from his own savings, but of course it's also still in Acholi, and he is a legal owner.
Bought a farm from whom? Because you say land is communal, nobody owns the land, so he bought land from whom?
But that's why I say, you have to take the technical arguments away. Northerners have owned land within the North, okay? And there are legal ways of owning that land. There are categories of land. And I think the one that Honorable Mao bought is from a village, I forget where it is. It's about... didn't you go for his homecoming? I think I saw you on the list. It was on that farm. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Oscar. Kato has articulated very well the legal angle, and I thought he would be in his usual belligerent form as a human rights defender.
As a human rights defender defending the Acholi.
Defending the Acholi, people who think are very aggrieved in this matter. But he has come in a different shape that I'm even still shocked by his views. He's articulated the legal angle very well. There are people who say they have bought land legally and so forth. Even Angelo, who is arguing the politics, cannot tell us properly. Like, for example, those who bought legally, like Chairman Mao, whom did they buy from? So it is both a legal and political issue. The Chief Justice, the ministers, etc. This matter is affecting each one of them, however big you are. I have spoken to the Minister for Northern Region, the Honorable Dr. Kenneth Omona. He told me...
Who was recently Christian?
Yes.
I beg your pardon?
Who was recently Christian?
By a member of your party.
I know the armed forces are not members of the NRM. So Dr. Mona told me that his farm, the barbed wire around his farm was cut, and some of the Balaalo started grazing on his land.
Now we appreciate the context of his enthusiasm.
Yes, his
in enforcing the executive order.
His dam was invaded, and he had to use police to remove the Balaalo who had now taken over his dam, because his own cows now had nowhere to, So he gave me this background to address the issue raising right now, that why is the Chief Justice, why is the Minister for Justice, people who should be, appreciating the law better, why are they also anti-Balaalo? But you can see even ministers are not being spared in this matter. People with protection and so forth, even their farms have been invaded.
Invaded?
Yes, invaded, yes, to use the similar word, to borrow the word from Angelo.
Yeah. Invaded by Balaalo.
Invaded by Balaalo. He told me...
from Acholi himself. Is he an indigenous Acholi?
Dr. Mona? Yes, he's an indigenous Acholi who has migrated to Kaberamaido. But he's an indigenous Acholi. He's an Acholi. His own
in Acholi and Kaberamaido.
No. He's not a Kumam. He's an Acholi. So
I would say let us leave him to confirm that, because that is not a settled matter.
Yes,
and it shouldn't matter, because I think if Dongo To is a Madi, I think.
He told me to tell you that he would like to come to the Capitalgang to...
I've tried to invite him severally, but I failed to do that.
To give better context to this. So he told me that some of these Balaalo, yes, have acquired some land, a small piece of land, where the cows spend a night. Now that's like a crowd. But during day, they are all over the place in areas they have not acquired legally. So some of these things is what is causing this, the sentiment you hear in the north. He also gave me an example in Otieno's park home, where I think somebody was killed in a scuffle between Balaalo and somebody over these issues. So it is both a legal and political issue. Politically, Angelo has really broken down the issues. There are deep-seated grievances by the people of the North. 20 years of war in IDP camps, and they come back from the IDP camps before they even settle down back on their land. There are foreign people now trying to occupy some of the land.
Today I'm going to learn many words. Did you say foreign?
Yes, foreign.
An occupation.
Foreign to the region.
Occupation.
Foreign to the region. Foreign to the region. They are coming from outside northern region and they are trying to occupy this land. So deep-seated issues like compensation have not been tackled by government, which people of the North really think it is a very big injustice. I was in the camp for several years. I suffered under war for 20 years. You have not compensated me. You have not yet fully integrated me into the national equation. And now you want me to deal with this problem. I think that's where some of these issues are coming from. I watched the Honorable Genga Ratigo in one of the shows, and he articulated some of these issues really very well, speaking the language of the North. Yes, we are in Kampala, we hear some bit of snippets of what is happening in the North, but if people like the Minister, Dr. Mon, and the Chief Justice and so forth had not come forward to address these issues up to that level, I think we would have had a bigger problem. Because you can choose to close your eye and let the Balaalo graze cows, but you could end up with a much bigger problem, probably of violence or genocide against them tomorrow when this government is not there. Because right now you can say that my relatives have tools to use. They have tools, political tools, tools of violence and so forth that they can use to acquire some of this land and the legal tools and so forth. But tomorrow they might not have these tools and they might have a problem protecting them. So these are some of the arguments that actually the minister was making, and they made sense. That people now who have the tools should be able to use them in a just and fair manner so that there is coexistence tomorrow.
Okay.
Everybody can coexist. So the settlement of the people from the south in the north, it should be both legal but also politically accepted by the people of the north.
Okay.
The people should not be seen, the people of the north should not see this like they are being taken advantage of. No.
Okay. Benjamin Katana. That's another word I've taken now. Taken advantage of.
Thank you very much, Oscar. I think we are dealing with a cocktail of issues. The question of Balaalo, I think one would be wrong to strictly look at it in a legal sense or strictly look at it in a political sense, because or even social sense. Because when you are talking about ownership of property, acquisition of property, these are legal matters. But there are also some aspects that need to be interrogated. But I'll come to that. So in this debate, there are the knowns and the unknowns. The known knowns and the known unknowns, to use the phrase of Bush. And I think on account of political correctness, yes, I think on account of political correctness, there are some perceptions that have not come to the fore in this debate. For example, we have had an example of a minister who is from Kaberamaido but owns land in Acholi. I don't think he's being considered among the people who should be evicted. So there is a perception by the people in the community.
For him, he's not being considered amongst those to be evicted.
Yes, but he also came from somewhere. There are people who look at this Balaalo as a front guard for an imperial force in the region. And that's a perception that we cannot wish away I think it needs to be confronted and discussed and understood very well. That people do not just look at them as people who have come to in search of pasture and water, but there are other underlying motivations for the movement. It may not be true, but that's the perception. The other aspect that is important is that, and I think it has been hinted on by many people, the northern region, today we may be discussing Acholi, but I remember some time back there was a similar debate about Teso.
And Karamojong.
And Karamojong, but also there was also a debate about war. So you have a community that is emerging from war that has left families disintegrated, has left families impoverished, has left families displaced from their lands. Now, the interventions that the government has tried to put in place, in my view, were not well implemented, because I think the interventions, something akin to the Marshall Plan, should have been a very comprehensive rehabilitation program for both the people and the economy. We are now talking about the cities that are springing up, but these cities, while they have an effect on the lives of people, but it may not be so direct. If you go to these places where people used to have very prosperous farms, what is there? The farms
in which area?
In Acholi.
Okay.
The cows were eaten during war, the equipment destroyed, barbed wire stolen and other equipment, and some of these ended up in different regions of the country. So while there is infrastructure development, if you look at the livelihoods of people, if you look, actually, even if you looked at community resources like schools and hospitals in this region, where is the improvement? We have been told about the interventions. There have been a number of programs under the Office of Prime Minister, but there have also been the informal interventions, I think, that have been alluded to, largely led by Sare. But these interventions have largely been like deals. And money ends up, because they are done in darkness. They are not following a discussion by the country, by parliament, that these are the challenges and this is how they should be addressed comprehensively. So this money eventually ends up in pockets of a few people. That the other day, the country was discussing iron sheets meant for Karamoja being now in Bugisu, in Uganda, in Bunyoro, and other parts of the country. So these interventions, on account of the governance challenges of the NRM regime, have not had the intended effect on the lives of the people of northern Uganda. So when you are dealing with a community that is traumatized, both by impoverishment on account of war, but also the other effects of war, and then these other issues emerge, I think the debate cannot strictly be looked at in the legal sense. But the legal aspects cannot be ignored. Because if a person has acquired land through legal mechanisms, I think this person should not be treated as an invader. But the challenge is the shabbiness of the government and a weak state infrastructure. Because you see, the state of Uganda has an infrastructure up to the lowest unit of government, through local administration, local government, through internal security, and all these other organs of the state. But the challenge is that these organs of the state are largely distracted and involved in politicking and also deals. By the time these problems reach a boiling point, where were all these people of ISO, of what? These issues should have been raised to the people who make decisions made timely, but now we are dealing with a situation where it is at a boiling point. It means that someone somewhere slept on the job.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I mentioned...
Just conclude and then we go to Joseph.
Yes. But some of them have actually been accused of being part of that problem. The other aspect is that all these problems are reinforced by ethnic mistrust in our country. Angelo was giving an example of which I think in my view is a different context altogether. If someone wanted to acquire Kasubi tombs and what have you. But the issue is that the other day I read a story.
If they
I think
had
it
the
was
money and everything.
Yeah, but that is a historical site.
Okay.
It's not. but you can acquire land owned by the Kabaka of Uganda. You can own a lease on the land owned by His Majesty the Kabaka of Uganda. So it's distinguishable. But the question of ethnic mistrust. The other day I read a story in one of the districts of northern Uganda where Uganda businessmen were being targeted and chased. But the government, instead of leading the country in a discussion that is aimed at healing and starting afresh, always chooses political convenience. And now we are going to a general election. Museveni, having largely lost his grip on rural Uganda, his calculation now is on Acholi. And that's why he has been signing all sorts of agreements with leaders from Acholi, which agreements will not even translate into the transformation of the lives of the people. But like I mentioned, they are done in darkness. They are reduced into deals that will eventually benefit a few individuals, and the problem will not be solved. So I think we need to have an honest discussion in this country on how these matters can be solved. The government needs to approach this issue in an organized manner. Verify, know who owns the land legally, who acquired it through the right procedures, and is treated as a rightful or bona fide owner of land, and appropriate compensation is done if they are to move. Those who are there and they are just practicing nomadism, which is an outdated practice, they don't own the land, or they own some small piece of land and the animals are invading the farms of other farmers. I think those ones should be dealt with, but in a very organized manner, not knee-jerk reaction like we are seeing.
Before Joseph comes in, on that very point of what the government is going to do.
But even before, I was going to tell him he's also in a Buganda party. So people at his home ask him, why are you in a Buganda party?
No, even some Buganda ask, but this one, how can he be? Yeah, because as a country, we have failed to have that discussion. We have remained provincial in thinking. If you are a Musoga, you should be in a part of Basoga. If you are a Munyankore, you should be in a part of Banyankore. The country Uganda remains a name, but in terms of content and how we operate, we have failed to become a united state.
And is very mistrusted by the foot soldier. I don't know if you've heard about the group called Foot Soldier.
That is the opinion of NRM people like Duncan.
Oscar,
1 minute.
Before Joseph comes on, Katanaya talked about what the government should do and so forth. Yes, the government has set up a committee, a verification committee. So Balaalo, who have genuinely acquired land from somebody in Acholi or anywhere in northern Uganda, legally, they have fenced this land. They have a water source on the land, and they are not blocking any community road or blocking access to a water source for the community.
Shall not be evicted.
Are not going to be evicted.
Right.
So there is no need to worry. I think those who are worried are these ones we have been talking about, who have not followed the right procedures to acquire those lands.
Finally, you have spoken as someone in Ofonopondo's seat. So let's stop for a quick break and we'll go to Joseph Otieno. Welcome back from the break. It seems like land discussion is still going on. Joseph Otieno, you're on the microphone, and as we said, you're the most optimistic UPC person I know. I'm trying to look for the optimism in your submission this morning.
I quarreled earlier that you rejected the idea that you created yourself, that I am also the most optimistic Ugandan. You see why we need optimism. I think this is very important that we address this issue. It's very important that we address it soberly. I think it's important that we address it as a nation. And I think it's important that we acknowledge and accept that this is a political issue. The historical context, quite clearly, is I'd invite people, particularly those who can read, to look through for a documentary called A Brilliant Genocide. It's by an Australian filmmaker, Ebony Butler. It will tell you the amazing, sad reality of what happened in northern Uganda under this regime. I have attempted to persuade most Ugandans to read...
What happened to northern Uganda under this regime?
I'll contextualize. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And I'll contextualize further by emphasizing something that people also reluctantly like to refer to, because it's important for this debate. Milton Obote's own notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda, written way back in 1990. As early as 1990, Obote gives depth to the massacres in Luweero and gives depth to whatever was already then happening in northern Uganda, meaning Acholi. And so when I hear my colleagues talking, all these things predominantly embed into this. So how we basically decide and choose how to respond is a different matter. Quite clearly, I don't think this is a matter for definition for Balaalo, because we all know what it is, and we all know the nuances that unfortunately brings everyone else to be contextualized and called Mlalo in this. Unfortunately, the issues, if you look at notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda and you look at the brilliant genocide, you'll realize that actually, if we deconstructed these, Ugandans are as diverse as they come. Luweero, before NRA went there in 1981, was the most cosmopolitan part of the Republic of Uganda. And I've said this again and again and again. I think I need to emphasize it. Because in Luweero were the founding parents of Idi Amin. In Luweero were every nationality, including Banyarwanda, and so therefore including some, quote, Balaalo. All nationalities, identities across the Republic of Uganda. And people lived peacefully. Immediately, these guys entered. I have told you that there's a family in Nagongra, a guy who just passed hardly four months ago. He was chased. He lost land because see the legality element. There is a group that is asking me, to try and help them, and Abdul will have a conversation about this, because it requires powers of members of parliament and things like that. So they come to me over mini surgery. They want compensation. These are communities that have been chased out of Uganda, and they lost land, they lost property. When I went to Miri, one of my classmates was a Japadola who came from Miri, and all I know is his surname, but he didn't even speak the Padola properly. So that's the possibility of this nation state that I talk about. But then what happened, where people come in and inject identity as a basis of seeking political power. So if then the net early victims of this were people predominant from the north and West Nile, and to less extent those of us from the east, but generally those, and it was about Uno or Acholi. Then you go to Teso, and you see what I saw with my own eyes. I was having a conversation with a decent friend of mine from NRM in another program, and where I talked about as a witness, and I've got the lawyers here, where I saw the Balaalo, the Karamojong of the south, as I call them, cattle from Teso being siphoned southward in 1987 to the south, and we know this cattle ended up here in slaughterhouses in Kampala, and so these are experiences that people have had in Bukedi, have had in Teso, have had in Acholi, have had in Karamoja itself, including ongoing now Lang and then Teso and then West Nile. Now, how we contextualize this conversation, I don't know. And I think somebody talked about leadership. But it's possible, unfortunately, the political leaders from really the north and east, backed by responsible political leaders from across the country, we needed to be able to have a conversation to simply say that, look, what do we do about these apparent things? As a refugee scholar, I've said this again and again and again, that the northern Uganda, which saw the death of guns and northern Uganda, that I personally contributed to compelling Mr. Museveni's regime to talk peace so that we end the war, needed an immediate post-conflict reconstruction program. Now, the people of Acholi, and I was also one of the campaigners, and I did memorandums upon memorandum, myself on behalf of Uganda People's Congress and others, that look, in Acholi, concentration camps were not the requirements, but this government, this regime, did it deliberately, mobilizing people to uproot them from their families, and they couldn't sustain them. After they did that and we failed in this debate, we said, okay, declare a state of emergency. Again, this guy is refused. Now, at the end of guns, which we forced this regime to create, people returning to their homes. Up to now, I know people who don't know their villages. By that, I know people, particularly from Acholi and Lango communities, who've never returned home to Uganda, leave alone to their own families, So people don't even know where their grandparents were buried. Maybe even some of their own parents were buried. Those are the focus that we needed to be putting ourselves in. It did not happen. For that to happen, and then you find...
Before you leave the microphone, on that very point, there is a perception that your UPC government mistreated Ugandans. And that's some of the reasons they left the country and have never returned home. And I know Abdu has a stern look on his face, but some of the things that are attributed to UPC are unforgettable. And when you say things like this regime, people look at you and say, you just don't know what the UPC did.
No, there's nothing that UPC did that can be compared to what this regime did, particularly in Luweero and in Acholi and in Teso, and including in my own Nagongere, because I don't know a circumstance. I don't know anywhere.
Joseph has a ready answer.
so there is none. But number two, I think after 40 years in power, and we're having a conversation in which we have Balaalo, unfortunately, in Acholi, some of whom came, and I told this program the other day, came from Tanzania, people whom we don't know, entered the Republic of Uganda. I think it's a very difficult conversation to try and bring in Uganda People's Congress in. In any case, we can still go back to Luweero where this foundation conversation did take place. Ugandans also need to be able to have a conversation and say, look, maybe the people who are in Acholi are experts in acquiring land, because we got into Museveni's top guys in government. How many of them have farms in Luweero, and we want to know how they acquired those. Kisozi, which is supposed to be a farm that UPC did very well for the people of Uganda. Right now, I don't know how Mr. Museveni acquired it, and sometimes the guy likes to boast about it. But it's fine. If only he boasted over that and readdressed the post-conflict situation in Acholi, meaning, let's resettle these guys, let's return them, let's equip them, let's enable them, and where possible, let's possibly even, in quote, teach them how to farm if they don't know. That's what you do. You don't say, we shall arrogantly pile up a group of people from TZ and come and teach you how to use your land. It is in the process of that becomes Duncan, let me tell you. In the course of... We
need to tell Ugandans that the truth that there are no Tanzanians grazing in the north.
No. I'm coming to that.
These are Ugandans who had meandered into Tanzania with their cows, and they were chased by the government of Tanzania back into Uganda.
Then you need to
they are not Tanzanians.
Then you need to tell Chris Barumuzi.
They are Ugandans.
You need to tell Chris Barumuzi to tell Ugandans properly, because it's the first time I'm hearing that element of rebuttal. But the reason why I refer to that, in any case, is that because they've been chased from Tanzania, does not give them the panacea. There's no panacea for them to find their way via Teso, get chased, Bunyoro, get chased, then conveniently find yourself in Acholi, and all of a sudden you have huge guns, and loss of money to an indigenous community which were amongst the largest cattle keepers in this country. And finally, Benjamin is quite right. This identity question, because that's why I deliberately brought it out as a country. Because for me, I'm just tired, really. That I am a Republican Ugandan or Pan-Africanist. I find it absolutely uncomfortable that a Benjamin Katana may struggle to go and find a farm in Busesa or in Nagongera, or in this case, particularly perhaps somewhere in Atiak, because of the guys who now we know have been chased from TZ, but they conveniently have found space in Acholi. And in any case, the final point, this grazing thing, Mr. Museveni talks about culture. At what stage do we break the culture of cattle grazing and looking for water? Mr. Museveni has stopped it because he talked about commercializing it. We are not helping the Karamojong to do so. We are not helping the Bates whose cattle has not been restocked. But in Acholi, we are going to teach them how to do it. Quick point. There is a perception and possible reality that this land issue involves the question of Mr. Museveni one time going over Acholi and seeing this big expanse of land, say, oh, Bambi, Jesus, I wish this was there somewhere near Rachitura. That is one. But quickly, there is a belief that, let him respond. There is a belief.
Is he one of the people that own farm northern Uganda?
There is a belief that these things about land per se, don't forget that many of these guys come from very squeezed corners of Uganda. But number two, that the issues of minerals. And then number three, there's issues of oil. All these are theoretical perceptions. So you can see how political these things are. So we need to have this open debate as Ugandans, but a debate that brings us together rather than one that breaks
balanced debate.
By the way, Joseph, the biggest group of the Balaalo in the north, these are peasants who have no idea about your minerals or oil or whatever.
But
their interest is
peasants with guns.
Is grazing ground.
Peasants with guns.
Grazing ground. Mainly.
He's following up the line that Angelo brought up that says pacification and a front for other people. And you had also mentioned
them
it.
Corporate Balaalo for a reason. They have
you had also mentioned it that some of
corporate Balaalo.
Duncan, you mentioned that some people have power.
Corporate Balaalo, the door is talking about, for example, generals, etc. Like now,
even smaller.
The UPDF commanders in the north, because you are deployed in a region for maybe 10, 15 years. So you become part of the community, you acquire land because traditionally a cattle keeper, you move your cattle from Mankore to the north. Yes, those are the corporate Balaalo they are talking about.
Fair point.
But like 90% of the Balaalo there are peasants who have no idea about
and to support them,
government,
to support them.
etc.
And
like
Joseph didn't make this point, but to support them. See, gentlemen, this idea of tribal identities for your party, which is a Pan-African party, it's a mass party, Pan-African party, okay, that has got a world view about integration in East Africa. Why aren't we talking about, the dignity of those very same peasants? They're Africans, The idea that we should identify them by where they come is bad. So whenever I hear Abdul that these guys came from, I don't know, northern Tanzania or from Rwanda or from Congo or from Sudan, I ask myself, but what's wrong with that? We embrace an African identity.
The other day the president said, let's embrace everyone.
Absolutely. And by the way, let me end this.
I agree as well.
Oscar, let me end this on the note of one of the most famous northerners from Acholi at a national level, the late Honorable Daudi Ocheng, MP. He was a son of a chief, but he also was MP for Mitiana here and a supporter of the Kabaka. There is a strong tradition.
A lot of people saw him as a true Muganda.
More than a true Muganda for all intents and purposes. But the point being that we cannot abstract that history, excise it. There is a Uganda where you, Duncan, can become MP for Moyo East, and that is still a possibility.
The Ochiennos had a policy that you stand in one constituency, but you voted in another 3 constituencies, something like that. The UPC2 government.
Abdul, you're on my. I don't want to. You can bring up so much history. There was a gentleman, Sogaman, wanted to stand in Western Uganda, and that was one of the tools used against him.
He's actually my relative, Ngoma Ngime.
Yeah. So
he performed very well. I think the difference was about 30 votes or 60. Yes. So even the people who voted for him were not Basoga; they were Banyangore.
Though he had more of.
So you were not on
backing,
you were not on a pacification mission of pacifying Angole. But anyway, back to
yeah,
the topic.
Back to the topic. We are just taking it up from last week, as you remember. But you see, legally, I don't think there should be big discussion about this. If somebody has bought land and he owns it, and all Ugandans are entitled to live in any part of this country. If you are to go legalese, no problem. But is this issue about law? I doubt. I really doubt. This is about politics. It's about economics. It's about culture. 2, you see, after the war, the entire Acholi economy was literally destroyed. The entire Acholi economy was destroyed. What the Acholis remained with is only land and themselves, who had not gone to school, who didn't have proper even health services, just their bodies and their land. So after a few years, if there is another group that comes to sort of take away the land, but now that they can't take it away, they own it. And it makes matters worse, like I said last week, that generally the land tenure system is the Acholi's communal, it's customary, generally. The people who are coming are not coming to use that land under that tenure system. They are coming to convert this communal cultural land into individual private land. And that's where the crisis is now. So the Acholis now look at our land being taken away by these people. And that distinguishes the case of one of themselves. If, for example, there is a Mao who is trying to say, okay, now I can utilize, they might say, well, this is our brother. But even that is a debate within Acholi. It's a big, big debate within Acholi. People like Geno, Otema, and so on. The Acholis are debating, say, by the way, how did you acquire this clan land? This, yes, they are really debating it. So the Balaalos have found themselves in this problem. But as somebody was saying here, how did we arrive at this point? Because we just knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time. Somebody, I think it was Mr. Katana here talking about the state infrastructure, ESOs and so on. But you see, this sort of Balaalos who are having guns and so on, you can't divorce them from that infrastructure. So, because you say, I don't agree with Duncan where he says the majority are peasants. They are not. No. Where do these peasants get guns? Where did these peasants get money to buy? In these large trucks, acreage? That's not true. That's really not true. You've not done your research properly. You need to look at it. So one,
he's in Ofonopondo's chair.
Oh yeah.
What do you want him to say?
I don't envy you, my brother Duncan. It's a very difficult chair to sit in sometimes. So, and then there is also a history to it. One actually elite was talking to me this particular week, and was raising the issue Joseph was talking about. That look here, even after the 1985 war, that war theater, the famous Ruwero Triangle, from Kivoga, Muvende, the Big Ampija, and so on. We got a new, after 1985 war, you had a new class of landowners. And many of them had actually participated in the 1985 war. Many of them. And I'm sure, Duncan, you know this, that there are many people who participated in that war, and they went back and pissed out a little bit of... I don't know.
No comment.
I don't know about cases. So, and this actually was really serious. I said, look, this thing has been happening. Only that for us, the only thing we are left with after the war is land. And if it is taken away, you are really destroying us as Acholi people. And that's what the Acholi elite are thinking about. So it ceases to be purely legal issue. It's about existential, of the Acholi people. How are they thinking? Until we go on. If, for example,
in the next, because these guys don't have money, those who have money are not very many. And if people are just coming in, buying land, and you're poor, tomorrow you'll find that the Acholi are actually squatters on their own land, or what used to be their own land. And the reason is, when they say their own land, this is tribal land, this is clan land. There are very, very few pieces of land where these guys have titles. This title thing, I think somebody should do some research. How much of Acholi land is titled? It's very, very, very small. So what they are fighting for, according to this Acholi friend of mine, is their communal land being taken away. It's their tribal land being taken away. But at the end of the day, like I said last week, you are going to foot a big bill as taxpayer, because I can see legally there are so many illegalities being done, and at the end of the day you are going to see, cases in court, and you're going to pick some bill, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Caught between a rock and a hard place.
I want to come back to Kato Tumusime. One of the reasons I should continue inviting Duncan Abigaba, he teaches me how to pronounce names. So it's Kato.
Yes, Kato.
Kato.
Oh, you're pronouncing it in Uganda? Kato.
Yeah, we have Kato, but Kato. So a couple of...
the meaning is the same. So.
The meaning, yes, indeed it's the same meaning. But if you look at X, formerly Twitter, you have Otim, but his Mwine Edgar says at Opaya, that's Angela here. Context, please inform at Semoyamsoke and the listeners that in Ngoya and Amuru, Indians have leased square miles of land and are doing large-scale agriculture without such contradictions as with Balaalo. And it continues. Someone has said the same, or same of Salim Saleh. Then Vita Chow says, Angela has explained it well. Northerners have coexisted with other communities, including the Balaalo, some of whom are prominent religious leaders. These communities were significantly affected by war and recovery and may not come soon. Then Omoding Alan says, some actually sold their land for what they thought was big money. But when the money is divided by the extended family, you find each getting as little as 2 million. They buy borders or booze, and when the money is done, they cry foul. This is all on X. So, and then of course Atoki says, tell Honorable Katundu that if Ngomangime returned to Mbara today, he would win overwhelmingly. So you started this conversation. How would you conclude it now, Kato?
In my simple conclusion, Mr. Oscar.
Oh, you know I'm a teacher of English. So you can never say Mr. Oscar. You can say Oscar.
Sorry. Oscar.
Yeah.
Thank you for that correction. Duncan talked about some things that my discussion really defended one tribe, which is the Balaalo. But he must understand that...
He was referring to it as saying, typically.
Exactly. Exactly. And Balaalo are also Ugandans, like the Acholis. We all share the same equal rights, and we are protected the same. So if the issue affects their interests in the land, we must as well come up to defend them and talk about their interests as well.
But we disagree here. They want Mr. Human Rights. You need to look at as Abdul has been explaining, the one that has suffered war torn and so on. That's where Duncan was coming from.
That's what I talked about, that we should not bundle them all together. The people who have their legal interests acquired legally must be taken in a different shape than the other one who came to grab and own that land.
Or pacify using
but you
language.
See, I don't think we'd be having this conversation if people went and just grabbed land. Because that is an illegality.
Yeah.
And if that happened, they would just be thrown out. Where would the debate be?
We have some of them, and that's why Duncan talked about the verification committee that is doing that to verify how did this person acquire this land at that particular time. So we have those ones that use their power, that use their connections, come and grab land. This is not only happening in Acholi, it happens everywhere. So it's not new, Honorable Abdu, that we have this kind of setups. Now, the other question would be, and that maybe would shape the discussion is, are the Balaalo the only people who are not Acholi own land in Acholi? And my understanding would be no. There are so many other tribes and so many other people that own land, but they are not Balaalo. Why is the only issue now related to the Balaalo? Things concerning the big wigs and the politicians that are saying that they have been affected by the Balaalo activities, including cutting their barbed wires, it is not only happening in Acholi. People have faced this all over the country, and that one should not shape the discussion on whether the Balaalo should be evicted or not. I think the biggest issue goes beyond that. But to end the point here, Oscar, the politics of identity now has taken over this country, like my colleagues say here, and it's obvious that when we near an election period, each group, each ethnicity will come up and then they identify themselves with the Acholi. This is what we are speaking. With the Baganda, with the Banyanko, this is what we are speaking. And the effect of that is that from the people of Acholi, it will now move to a different region and a different identity group also claiming for the same rights, and they will be calling the president to come and rescue them in respect to protecting their interests. That's the worst thing that we shall face as a country unless we now chew it from the word go. Verification is very good, like Abigaba said, and I applaud him for that. But the only challenge with the verification process is the people that will come to enforce. Will they follow the result of the verification? The answer is no. We have seen it.
All those who will verify.
All those who will verify, will they do the right thing? We have seen it that a certain policeman or an enemy man will come to arrest you and ask, why are you even arresting me? Yes, but what did you even do? That is what will happen here in the same verification process. Even when the results are clear, the person who will be sent to enforce
is a distraction.
Yeah, the person who will be sent to enforce these verification findings will not be knowing what to do and what not to do. But they will look at Abudu and they say, but we know Abudu, at least let us spare him.
But
regardless of what they...
Haven't you interested yourself? We said last week that we spent, hundreds of millions of shillings setting about a commission of inquiry on land matters.
Oh yes.
And why aren't we relying on the findings? I think verification is basically like treating a cancer with asprin.
That's very true.
Kato, let me. I don't know whether you've heard about the conflict over power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've heard about it?
Yeah. Sure.
They set up a committee chaired by former Chief Justice Bat Katreve. Have you seen their report?
No, that's one.
And the conflict is still on.
It is still on.
The conflict is still
in
on.
my home area, and I have a
Yes.
cousin who is now actually impaired because we got him land in somewhere there, and there are killings every other.
I don't know whether you followed that conflict of our power.
Exactly.
Yes.
The
So
interesting
if you are failing to solve our power,
they are
how are you going now to go to this huge?
the problem with this
final
regime,
sentence for you from you.
The problem with
Kato.
this regime is that they bring the same tactics to solve the same problems, and the tactics used in the first have not solved the problem, but they want to rely on them. What happens here is that a commission or a committee is set up to investigate a certain issue. Before we know it, there is another commission or committee set up to investigate the deeds of the first committee to solve the problem. That's the whole round
The
that
destruction
we are all
Angela is
facing
talking about.
yeah, the destruction. So here we shall not have even results. Yes, the verification may take place, but we shall wait for the report or the findings of this committee. We shall not have them, and the people will be affected. And the intention is not to solve the problems of this, but after politics, that will be the end of the story.
So Duncan, don't anymore. We have Nora Waraga on X, formerly Twitter. She begins with telling Joseph Otieno, we are not Bateso, we are Iteso. And I'm here waiting for change of subject. The constitution is clear on how land is accessed and use rights got under customary tenure. Balaalo are cattle keepers, they are not a tribe. In air trade, they have violated the constitution. Why are we spending us discussing an issue which is already settled by law, and the executive has issued an order accordingly? Then there's where is this lady who has said she has switched off? Yes, this called Ashbag 82. The problem child on X says when Honorable Assembly is not present, she switches off. I'd like to tell her she has missed a lot, but Honorable Assembly lost his father-in-law, and that's why he's absent from gang today. We stop for a quick break, and in the break, I will ask the gangsters here, what should we discuss next in the limited time? PFF and even though Semuju is absent, or the goons that are being prosecuted in courts of law. It was one of those rare moments on the Capitalgang when we exercise democracy in its real form, unlike what Abigaba tried to describe at the beginning of the show. So we will...
Very impressed.
Yes, we will discuss the goons in yellow that are being prosecuted. We have senior counsel in the studio, Honorable Abdu Katuntu. Please lead on this one. Is it the right? Is it the? And you're always intent on the law, so you'll be pleased that at least there's a.
You're being unfair to me, really, Duncan. This is Duncan's thing.
When you have senior counsel, this is a program that has 3 city lawyers present, and the senior one is Abdu Katuntu.
Well. Okay. First of all, I think
I could
there was a lot
of circumstances for you. The president, you were aware.
Yes, I was. Yeah. I mean, it was all viral all over social media. I watched it. First of all, in disbelief, only that somehow, when I sobered up, it wasn't surprising. One, we are going into an election year, and when I eventually watched the newscast in the evening, and somebody was explaining how these people, one of the relatives was explaining how these people had been recruited by operatives of the state and leaders of the national resistance movement, giving them money, giving them T-shirts to actually either give a false impression that the national resistance movement is supported by the youth, so they were not really minding whether these are thugs or not, or they recruited them specifically to do what they did. It sends a signal which is very, very worrying, that we are going to have one party using money, state resources, and promoting thuggery, political thuggery. You see, this politics, it has reached an extent where some of us who are actors are feeling ashamed of what goes on. You go, and it's not something you want to be associated with. That's why even those who recruited them eventually denied that they did. So if you know you are doing such a despicable thing, and then eventually you have to deny it, why do you, for heaven's sake, do it? So, Duncan, when you go back to your parties, this is the sort of debate you should be having. It doesn't augur well for your party. And now we know that actually some of these people are your agents. They are your agents. So there is no reason why you should deny them. Just desist from recruiting younger people because they have no jobs. You give them just a T-shirt and 10,000, and some of them now have ended up in jail because you want to clean up your own act. It is terrible. It is really terrible. So, Oscar, the political players, especially those who have capacities, political parties, stop abusing these younger people. Because you need to be parents. You need to be leaders. Stop it, please. It is very, very bad for this country. And younger people, those who, unfortunately, these sort of people will not be listening to a program like this. But they should really divorce themselves from being used or abused by selfish, actually very hopeless political actors.
That's really strong from Abdu.
Yes. Let's start with you.
As a lawyer, that's very strong. And so it's a message home, because it's an important message.
They start with you, Angelo. On this topic, I'll make sure that between Joseph and Benjamin, speak last.
Oh, because Benjamin's party is a ghetto-based party, and some of the labor that has been hired by the NRM is from his party. They're only temporary workers. In the election, they go back to NUP, no? And then this man here...
I like how you say temporary workers.
Yes, and then this man here, Ocheno, these are the original architects of this kind of thing under the UPC youth wings, you know, eh? So they both have experience. I appreciate that you put them last.
Yeah.
You know?
Is that a compliment or
No. Just stating the facts.
I'm sure.
But that said, it is true that there are some public policy issues at stake here. Youth demography and urban fragility, if I use policy terms. We just have a lot of young people who don't have what to do. And since the god of politics apparently is money these days, they are dabbling. You know, if someone came to your slum and said, 20K, let's go, here's a T-shirt, they will do it. You know, I don't blame them. I just blame what Abdul has said is the nature of politics today. Maybe I just leave the listeners with a recommendation for a framework of how to think about bad politics and bad economy by the economist called Charles Tilley, who wrote war making and state making as organized crime. It's the scene of the state is basically what the mafia, the approach the mafia uses in controlling bootlegging operations. But it's a sad spectacle, really.
Kato.
Thank you, Oscar.
And these young people cannot afford your services.
Oh yeah, that's very right. Most of them actually cannot. Even representing themselves, they cannot afford that because they don't know what they are supposed to do, what they are not supposed to do. Sometimes I help when I am available and not fixed, but not to this kind of people. That show this kind of organisms. No.
Yeah.
If they are fighting for a good cause, I offer myself to support and represent them on a pro bono basis, but not this kind of organisms. Now,
in fact, Nora again says, please stop infantilizing our young adults.
Exactly.
If they are old enough to vote, they are old enough to make their own decisions.
The advantage we got this time. The advantage you got this time is that technology has helped us. If we did not see the first video saturating on social media, the security agencies wouldn't have taken interest in looking for these hooligans and having them brought to books of law. But look at how they were recruited. I watched some interviews done by some of their relatives on how they were recruited. We must accept that the level of vulnerability of these young people, that I think they are making it deliberate, even when they have the qualifications and they have something that they can do to earn themselves a living, they don't. And they're waiting for the politicians that are bad, in the words of Cartoon, to come and give them 10,000 and a T-shirt, and that they have made their own day. But I want to think that most of these people from their relatives were not recruited even from Kampala. They got from other areas surrounding Kampala, brought because they want to earn a 10,000 for themselves and a T-shirt. But most of these politicians want results from the young people, and they are users and manipulators. But the results, if they don't match with what they intend to portray themselves to look like, then they will abandon you like they did. A message to young people is that before you even come up to work for somebody or join their teams and the rest, first understand them, first to know what they are interested in, their cause, and maybe if it aligns with what you want to achieve, then you will not be abandoned, because I've seen so many politicians who bring such kind of people to join their teams, they are arrested maybe for making processions and the rest, and they follow them up. They even attend their courts. But the problem with these bad politicians is that they will abandon you. Yes, they want your result, terrorize the people so that you scare them. Because the old man, my grandmother in the village, will not join this kind of politics if they see that they will be dragged on the ground and kicked and all that. So it is intentional that you employ these people, you deploy them to terrorize the people, and you scare most of the old people so that they don't participate in the votes. And that's what the Benjamins are going to face in the coming elections and the Katuntos of this world. But the young people should actually desist from being used, manipulated, and then dumped. Yeah, that's the message.
Yeah. Duncan Abigaba,
The sponsor.
from the word bad politicians, and now you're hearing sponsor. Everyone has been looking at you. Everyone is looking at you.
There is no proof.
But there's no proof. So there's no proof. But as Angela said, Joseph has no speaking or power on this. They are the architects, and you have just copied it very badly.
Yeah, you know, the NRM is a success of the UPC. Most of the NRM top readers right now, the president, Professor Kamuntu, and others, were mentored by President Obote himself. They worked in the office of the president. There was that powerful.
Joseph is shaking his head, but you are stating facts.
UPC Policy Commission, ETC, most of them worked there.
Yeah.
So it is not surprising that the NRM could have borrowed some of the ideas of the UPC. But Oscar, if you can recall, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, we sat here on the gang and we discussed the youth elections that had happened in the youth councils. And the NRM, we are boasting of having even taken over the whole of Kampala. Results had come from different parishes and divisions, and the NRM had won 80-90% etc. So this is a point of reckoning. If the NRM has all this support in Kampala, so why would you have to hire goons? Indeed, if they hired goons, because we have not yet established that these were NRM hired goons. The police has taken over the matter. Yes, you'll forgive me. I have to speak like a phone pond on some of these contentious issues. The police has taken over the matter. They are investigating. They have not yet given the details. We don't even know the particulars of the suspects. The party has not issued a statement to own or disown them. So we cannot say they were NRM goons. No, there is no proof. but also it alludes to the fact that why some of us have attempted to run for party leadership. And these are the things we have been telling the party. The party has a lot of support. It's in Kampala itself. The Secretary General on the nomination of the president, what, for example, he could have done is to organize a delegation from every village of Kampala or every parish of Kampala with minimal logistics. And they would have a very huge crowd to welcome the president for his nomination. As we speak right now, I think the party chairman is at the nomination at Prot 13 Child on the Road, and we don't know what will happen after the nomination. We could have another case scenario by the time we leave the studio. These are mistakes that the party is doing, because they could have organized delegations from every parish, and they would have a huge number at the nomination of the president. But the party has been very commercialized, that they think every problem is either money, and if money does not work, deploy some bit of violence. The issue is not only in Kampala, because you have been hearing, I think in Zimbabwe, somebody was shot. I think, unfortunately, somebody died.
Yesterday there was a lot of violence.
Somebody died in Zimbabwe.
What do you think is going to happen in Zimbabwe in the general election?
We only have a few minutes left. That's an entire topic on its own.
In Sinjiro yesterday, there was a lot of chaos. A lot of property was destroyed. Different NRM camps Isinjiro unfortunately bears these old marks of UPC youth wingers. It was among the most affected district region area.
Gosh.
In the whole country in UPC2 government.
Yeah.
It was the area most affected by UPC.
UPC will cleanse you.
So the process the problem has carried on into the NRM. But really, my NRM colleagues, I would want to implore them that we cannot run a country like this. Internally, you cannot have contradictions up to the extent of people losing lives in your primaries. So what will happen in the general election? If brothers can kill each other under the same roof, now what should we expect in the general election? So I'm appealing really that the Secretary General should come forward and take leadership on these matters and guide. The NRM also needs to act. If really you unleash goons like you did in Isinjiro, they are destroying property of your opponents and so forth, can't that person be disqualified to set a precedent for people to know and learn that if you exceed a certain level, you can be disqualified from a political process? Yes, we need to see some action.
Joseph Otieno, as we've learned,
I am shocked by the baptism.
The architect of politics.
Can you imagine?
Angela has
yes, we are. Look,
yes, we are doing it, but also UPC did it.
Can you imagine that? And Angelo here is journalist. I can understand him because
no, Duncan has condemned it.
Because
it's not in the party.
No, actually, Joseph, on this,
we
need to also look to ourselves. We made mistakes, especially the issue of West Nile. There are things we did which were really glaring mistakes and unforgivable. At some point we did say, by the way, on that particular point we are sorry.
And I'm not sure whether that's...
And where? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's documented. It's documented.
That is West Nile.
It's documented.
After the show, I'll invite
Joseph
to do 3 times mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa.
They also banned Mzee Byanyuma's DP office in Mbarara town. UPC wingers, especially from Isinjiro.
So now you're speaking for me. No, look.
But let's focus on it.
No, Byanyima gave a very clear clarification that. Don't forget, Byanyima, DP thing aside, was a very close friend of Dr. Milton Obote, and if only such a sensible relationship could be. Byanyima was just simply driven by the mad extremism of Museveni and others, and then he found himself personally entangled into that. But look, Oscar, in 2011, I became a candidate later, but Fox Odoy and William Okechu, in the early sign of what happens in NRA, they did a terrible thing on the youth of the then my constituency, West Podama North. And I had to come onto Radio Trace to try and calm down not only the young people predominantly, of course, their supporters, but also to meet both of them separately. And all of them William would say, oh, Joseph, you know Fox. Fox would say, oh, Jame, that guy, something like that. Museveni picked this up, and allegedly, he actually called them to order, including saying that, well, if you guys misbehave like this, we might lose that seat to the sensible, decent UPC guy who was basically coming. But that's a slightly different story. So these things are terribly unacceptable. Now, I was actually going to admit for the first time something to link with the UPC, the one which I authoritatively know. And that is the Guild President's elections, I think in 1981, Abdu. Apparently, the UPC students in Makerere chose to elect that they would not lose, and chose to elect that they would not lose. The party headquarters was so disgusted, and I got this from the party leaders, including Cecilia and then later Dr. James Ranieri and others. The party was not involved. I'm giving context. Now, these are young, radical guys who don't like to lose. And unfortunately, of course, the party in government and the perception then was this was a UPC policy. So that's the student thing. My fantastic friend, Maid Kwesiga, is away. He was the first guild president, very, very respectable. He's an authority on these things, including whatever happened. That we acknowledge. Number two, in the 60s, when Bidandi Sali, amongst the youth leaders, were actually expelled. and I think a relative of Abdul Kichirunda. Turns out that these young youth extremists who were getting out of order of the party and they were disciplined. You know, the irony is these guys got disciplined and then they decided to say that the party was bad. But the party was exercising responsibility in leadership. Fast forward to the 1980s UPC. I was young enough, I started these things from Mwiri, Abdu's school. That's why we're decent guys, I genuinely have no experience of UPC youth as other student leaders or indeed youth leaders, either in Mwiri, any other school I attended, in Kololo, in Makerere, but Makerere by then government had been overthrown, or Toro, anywhere else. I don't have any experience of so-called UPC youth wingers taking the law into their hands. Remember, we were a governing political party, but faced by a banditry in Luwero. Now, I understand some cases in Acholi where some Balaalo, some Banyarwanda, some NRM supporters, known, would mobilize and organize to support Museveni in the bushes. And the UPC leaders would come, would come up. No, would come up. So if
Joseph,
that you cannot compare that.
Yeah.
You cannot compare that to the mess of what is happening at the moment. So self-defense. Likewise, actually in Luwero, where of course we ended up where our Luwero district chairperson was hanged by NRM. A future National Truth and Reconciliation Commission will have to investigate the circumstances under which our chairman in Luwero was actually hanged. These guys were defending the nation, defending the party, defending a democracy. They were not thugs.
So, Benjamin Katana, and people are still posting on Balaalo issues. Someone says the value of a cow surpasses the commercial value we have come to associate with it, and so on. But you are only goons dressed in yellow, charged in court, and I must say first that you are also an advocate.
Yeah,
an advocate of guns.
No, a lawyer.
Oscar, the history of NRA and later NRM is a history of violence and criminality. And goons. UPC is called them bandits.
Yes, so there I was thinking we'll have a safe comment for conclusion.
The NRA and NRM later has always sought to rely on violence and criminality to settle political contestations. They did that in 1980. In the subsequent elections that we have had under the NRM, we have had criminal gangs being used against the opponents. We have had the Karangara Action Plan. We have had Chiboko Squad. We have had crime preventers. And remember recently during the Kawempe by-elections, this time you had people from the state apparatus behaving like criminal gangs. So the state infrastructure is highly compromised because of the political interests of Museveni. And the danger with this, today, there is a trial ongoing, and I don't want to, of people that were recruited in a similar manner. Because when criminal gangs interact with the state infrastructure, they get emboldened. That's why now we have people who were drawn from criminal gangs being tried for killing a very senior state attorney, and others probably. Now, in 2021, you had people that had been recruited from the similar groups, some of them being eliminated. You remember the case of Zebra Senyang, the head of state, came on TV and admitted he had been killed by security agents. To date, nobody has been charged. Now, the goons that attacked people. Recently, I watched an interview where the assistant to the national chairman of NRM indicated that the operation was being led by the director of crime intelligence, General Damurira. Now, you are saying police is investigating, but they are saying these groups were recruited by police. The challenge with this is that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the goons that are being relied on by the ruling party may be emboldened and carry out more daring operations, even outside politics. You know what is happening in Haiti? If you read the history of Haiti between 1960 something and 1986, the other day when the Jat people were terrorizing people in Kawempe, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Otafire, compared them to the Tonton Mashuto of that time in Haiti. You know where Haiti is today. So the NRM is preparing Uganda to be where Haiti is years from today. So it is unfortunate but not surprising, because this is how NRM has always done politics. But of course, I think many people have mentioned, the young people must know that it is their future that is being robbed from them. Because once you are caught in trouble, you face it alone. The government should give them employment opportunities, should give them an opportunity at life. But the government is now taking the government which has failed to give them equal opportunity and a chance at life is the same government that is relying on them, taking advantage of them, like it took advantage of the Kadogos in the Ruwero War. It has a history of taking advantage of vulnerable people. So it is not surprising that it is doing this now.
Let me, in the 2 minutes left, let me give 1 minute to Abdul Katonto. Maybe you'll have a better conclusion. I thought Katana would be a safe conclusion, but I've since realized that it was wishful thinking.
I think, Oscar, it is about a national challenge of the bad economy, where many young people, are unemployed, they are struggling to live, and then some selfish people take advantage of them. We need, as a country, to continue investing in creating opportunities, job opportunities for these young people, to get them out of this hopelessness, this hopeless situation they are in, which makes them vulnerable for some people to really to abuse them. So really, it's a national crisis. We need really to invest in these younger people, because you see, if there are many young people who are struggling, they are working either in Chikubo, where you will not be giving them a T-shirt and 10,000, say come and do this sort of thing. They will be trying to earn a living. So that is the biggest challenge the country has.
Thank you. I should say that Old Kira Road, I don't know if you pass there as well.
That's why, again, please tell
I'm still talking about Old Kira Road. I will engage with the director of KCCA, Old Kira Road. Yeah. You know, in our village in Chigo, we are a very modern village. We have solar lights, tarmac and all, but we are suffering from national waters. I've been engaging with them. Light for Mayaka, we are still, this modern Chigo, expensive land, but I'd like to have a positive. Star Cafe has fed cattle here. You don't need to come with your chapati in the pocket. Star Cafe is here.
I saw they are still remaining. You can call it for Waswasa. Kakuru.
Yes. On that one, you need to improve. And unfortunately, Honorable Semuju lost his father-in-law. May his soul rest in eternal peace. I'm a Rotarian, and we have many Rotary installations. This is the season for them. Last week, a good friend of ours, Katuntu, and I was installed, a big man. And then today I have a relative who's being installed. At Taiba, National Science Week, we won awards for a solar car prototype and won an app that could have done very well. I hope Ministry of Work comes to us, because this app cautions you 3 times and then you get the penalty. So my students could really do justice to that one. Rough cuts, yes, it is. Rough cuts, I don't know if I've said it right, Johnny. Is it rough cut or rough cuts? Rough cut is next on Capital Radio. I am Oscar Semoyam Soke, and I shall see you next week.